Good afternoon, and welcome to today's Assure Holdings webcast as part of the Planet MicroCap Showcase. It is now my pleasure to turn the floor over to your host, Scott Kozak of Assure Holdings.
Hello, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Scott Kozak. I'm the Director of Investor Relations at Assure Holdings. Quickly, here is our forward-looking statement. And now getting into the company overview. Assure is a healthcare services company dual listed on the TSX Venture Exchange and the OTC markets in the United States. We provide interoperative neurophysiological monitoring on an outsourced basis. In addition, we complemented our core business in the first quarter of 2021 by launching a telehealth offering for professional neurology services relating to interoperative neuromonitoring. As you can see on the bottom of the slide, our number of managed cases has increased substantially over the past few years. In addition, we have greatly increased the number of surgeons we are working with. We are devoted to providing the best quality clinical care. We are Joint Commission accredited, and that has led to a very high 97% surgeon retention rate. In addition, we are looking to uplist to a major U.S. exchange in 2021. In terms of our corporate objectives, there are four primary corporate objectives. The first is expanding scale. That's through organic methods and expanding into new states, extending our reach within existing states. Additionally, pursuing M&A opportunities. We've recently announced 2 M&A opportunities thus far in 2021 that we are pursuing. Third is the build out of our neurologist telemedicine platform. I'll talk more about that shortly. Our second corporate objective is signing in-network agreements with insurance payors. This is a competitive differentiator for Assure in the interoperative neuromonitoring industry. Hardly any of our competitors are similarly signing in-network agreements. We think it's very important because it drastically reduces the days to get paid from several months to 30 to 45 days, and also provides certainty in terms of the quantum in which we'll be paid. In 2020, we began the process of signing in-network agreements, and on a run rate basis, at the end of 2020, we had more than 20% of our revenue from our commercial insurance volume in-network. Our goal by the end of 2021 is to increase that to 50% of commercial insurance volume on a run rate basis. And that ties into cash collections. We brought our cash collections function inside the organization in early 2020 after terminating a third-party billing provider that had not been very effective. We have since automated a process that had been almost entirely manual previously. We've already seen really strong results. In 2020, Assure collected $24 million in cash. That was a 50% increase, 50% from $16 million in 2019. We expect our cash collections to continue to accelerate in 2021. And our fourth corporate objective is clinical leadership. We are investing in clinical leadership, including training and education for our technologists, and we only hire trained, certified IONM technologists, which is a competitive advantage for Assure. And we're also doing clinical research relating to interoperative neuromonitoring. These are both differentiators for us in the space, and one in which we want to further highlight as it is important for insurance payors. It's also important for surgeons and hospitals. Now, in terms of what is interoperative neuromonitoring, it is the use of electrophysiological methods to observe the functional integrity of neural gateways during complex invasive surgeries. So think about brain tumor surgeries, open heart surgery, deep spine surgery, total hip replacement, things of that nature. We work with the surgeon. We help guide them through the surgery to avoid making mistakes or injuring a patient that could result in things like strokes, heart attacks, partial paralysis, or worse. Interoperative neuromonitoring is considered the standard of care in the United States and has been for decades. It is recommended by the American Society of Anesthesiologists. It's increasingly integrated into medical school curriculums. There were about 1.4 million cases or 1.4 million procedures that used IONM services in the U.S. in 2019, and that number continues to grow. And the demographic tailwinds here are an aging population and one with more instances of chronic disease, often going hand in hand, that required the type of complex invasive procedures that IONM services work with. So historically, Assure has worked primarily on spine surgeries and neurosurgeries, as well as orthopedic, but we're increasingly penetrating into ENT and vascular. And we see substantial growth opportunities in those areas. How IONM works, first looking at the bottom of this screen, in the blue box, the person at the computer is an Assure employee technologist. That is a trained IONM certified technologist, which is a competitive advantage for Assure. And that technologist works with the same surgeon on every one of that surgeon's surgeries, becoming a core part of their operating room team, which is also a competitive advantage. It helps building trust and rapport. And again, they are working with that surgeon in real time, communicating with them about the neural gateways, the neural structures of a patient, providing alerts where necessary to help that surgeon avoid injuring the patient during the procedure. We bill, collect, and keep 100% of technologist-related revenue, and also we are billing incrementally to the surgeon. So that's incremental revenue, incremental billing to the surgeon. On the right-hand side, in the orange box, is the off-site neurologist services. So this person, similar to the technologist, is helping to guide that surgeon through the procedure, communicating with them in real time. Historically, this off-site position has been a contractor. Now, Assure has recently launched its own off-site neurologist services, and we've already hired 2 individuals. We expect to continue ramping up that function through the end of 2021 and beyond. That's important for a number of reasons. First is that it will help us collect incremental revenue and margin on every procedure, helping to make all of our existing operations more profitable. Secondly, it's important for surgeons and hospitals as we seek to win new business, as well as for insurance payors as we seek to strike new in-network agreements to control the clinical care, both from the technologist side and the professional side. So for the professional bill, currently we pay a flat fee to the neurologist contractor, which will be rolling off incrementally in 2021 and beyond as we fill that role with an Assure physician employee. And then we split the remaining revenue with the surgeon. So there's a revenue sharing piece for the surgeon that they get with Assure that they do not get with our IONM competitors. In terms of how Assure solves problems for its stakeholders, we have 4 primary stakeholders. And we already talked a little bit about the surgeons. We provide them with a trained certified technologist, one that they're going to work with the same technologist in every one of their surgeries. We also provide ancillary services to the surgeon, from scheduling to billing, collecting, and more. Those wraparound services are definitely appreciated. And there's a revenue share opportunity for the surgeon to engage in. From a hospital's perspective, we're increasingly communicating with hospitals that are looking to outsource their IONM services on a facility-wide basis. Those hospitals that still provide this service, it's typically not a core competency. It's often a cost center rather than a profit center. And so we expect to have information flow on hospital-wide agreements that Assure will sign for interoperative neuromonitoring services in 2021. From an insurance perspective, interoperative neuromonitoring is considered standard of care, and they want to work with the best providers and sign in-network agreements with best providers because it helps protect their patients, their clients. And so that is how we've been able to really ramp up the signing of in-network agreements. And from a patient's perspective, they're looking for the best possible clinical outcome. And that is something that Assure takes great pride in providing. For trends in the interoperative neuromonitoring industry, the key here is it's a very large industry, over $1 billion annually, a slightly larger percentage of which is the outsourced piece rather than the insourced piece. Overall, it's almost a $2 billion industry. It's very large, it's growing, and it's highly fragmented. Interoperative neuromonitoring is considered the standard of care and has been for decades, and it is because it saves the healthcare system money by avoiding injuries to patients. It improves patient outcomes, it reduces surgical complications, and it's increasingly being applied to new surgical settings. And as I said, it's a highly fragmented and it's also a chronically undercapitalized industry, one that's ripe for industry consolidation. So here we look at a competitive landscape SWOT, and Assure, when it looks at its competitive landscape, it really sees three groups of competitors. The first are IONM specific companies, of which Assure is one, although we are the only pure play publicly traded interoperative neuromonitoring company out there. We did about 10,000 procedures last year. There are a couple larger competitors, but again, this is an industry in which there are roughly 1.4 million cases per year, so no substantial individual large competitor. Our most frequent competitor among IONM specific companies is really very small, dozens, hundreds even, of regional or local providers that work with a few surgeons, have a few technologists in a city or a metro area or maybe a state. This group is suffering from some of the same things that Assure was suffering from 18 or 24 months ago, namely being almost entirely out of network, relying on third-party billing provider that often is not very effective, not having the scale or expertise to sign in-network agreements, and in this case, currently, suffering from COVID-related financial issues. As a result, we see a lot of opportunity for M&A amongst this group of IONM companies, and in fact, we've already announced 2 M&A transactions in 2021, and we have a pipeline of additional potential M&A transactions that we are pursuing for later this year. I'll talk more about those shortly. The second group of competitors are hospitals themselves. This is the insourced market. And again, many hospitals don't have the scale or the expertise to make IONM a core competency or profitable service offering. So we are talking with more and more hospitals and are engaged in multiple RFPs now relating to facility-wide outsourced agreements. And this is something we expect to have good news on in 2021. The third group of competitors are bundled service providers. And the two mentioned here, NuVasive, which is publicly traded, and Specialty Care, which is private equity backed, are the two largest players of the space. And they provide everything in the operating room from rods and screws to services including intraoperative neuromonitoring. But even these two largest players only represent 8 to maybe 10% of the market each. So again, this is a very fragmented space. On this slide, we look at where Assure is today in terms of its operational footprint. Those are the states in green. And the yellow and blue states represent our near-term expansion targets. As we look to expand into new states, we have a couple considerations in mind. The first is the regulatory environment in a particular state, being cognizant of that and making sure we are following all the necessary rules on a statewide basis. The second is we have a scorecard for each state in terms of the reimbursement for their insurance companies, both the private insurance companies, the commercial insurance providers, as well as the government insurance in a particular state, and that helps guide our expansion decisions. And the third is surgeon relationships. Before we move into a new state, it's very important for us to have enough surgeon relationships to produce enough case volume to keep our technologists optimized and highly efficient. On the next slide, we look at managed cases. So we have seen a substantial increase in managed cases. In 2019, we doubled our case count. In 2020, we increased our case count by 54%, and that was even with the impact of COVID. Assure was impacted by COVID, particularly in the spring, March and April of 2020, when elective procedures in some states were significantly curtailed. We recovered and returned to pre-pandemic rates in terms of number of cases beginning in May 2020. That's continued through present, but that doesn't mean we haven't been impacted at all. In certain regions, during certain periods of time throughout 2020, we were impacted incrementally by COVID, and that continued into the first quarter of 2021. But despite that, we are still forecasting substantial procedure growth in 2021. We're currently forecasting 14,000. And just to be clear, that's for organic growth alone. That does not include layering in any of the M&A transactions that I'll be discussing shortly. That would be incremental and in addition to the 14,000 cases that we're forecasting. Next, we look at our emerging telemedicine offering. And what's important here to really consider is that we aren't recreating the wheel. We're simply replacing a off-site neurologist with a Assure physician performing the same duties. And that is important because it makes our existing operations more valuable by facilitating the capture of additional revenue and margin. It adds organic growth and M&A opportunities to our pipeline. It helps us control quality of service, both from the technologist in the operating room as well as that telehealth neurologist outside the operating room. And that's important for surgeons and also for insurance payors as we seek to sign new in-network agreements. And it also strengthens our offering as we position to sell directly to hospitals. We view this as a very substantial market opportunity for Assure. We are going to start this process, and we already have started this process by having our Assure physicians handle Assure patients and our IONM case needs ourselves. But as we continue to ramp up and hire more neurologists, we expect to be able to handle cases from other IONM providers that have a technologist, but not the off-site telehealth neurologist services, as well as from hospitals that, again, may have the technologist, but not the off-site neurologist services. Eventually, and not that long in the future, probably beginning either later this year or into 2022, we expect our physicians to be able to provide the same type of telehealth neurology services as any other neurologist provider. So providing services like EEG, sleep studies, and things of that nature. So we see a tremendous amount of opportunity in this area. Now, talking about the Sentry acquisition, this is the larger acquisition that we announced in February of 2021. Due diligence is continuing as expected, and we expect to close this in the nearer term. But this is a valuable asset. Sentry was Joint Commission certified. They're a strong IONM provider. They are based primarily and do most of their operations in Texas, which is also Assure's largest market, particularly in the greater Houston area, but also helps us expand our operational footprint into 2 new states, which is Kansas and Missouri. They would, as we close this acquisition, it will increase our scale by 5,500 IONM procedures, which is approximately 50%. So it's meaningful for us. And the acquisition terms were a purchase price of $3.5 million, and that's $1.225 million in cash over time, the remainder in stock. One of the things that makes us so confident in this acquisition is, this is a company that is doing everything right from a clinical side, but is having issues with billing and collecting, which is very common in the interoperative neuromonitoring space, particularly for providers that are out of network, which is almost all of our peers. But we have great visibility into the Texas market because, again, it's our largest market, and we can see that we are collecting meaningfully more on a per procedure basis with this, doing the same procedures, getting paid by the same payors in the same state. And so we are very confident that we can quickly make the Sentry acquisition accretive as we move them onto our billing and collections platform. Our second acquisition that we announced just earlier this month was a much smaller tuck-in acquisition. It was opportunistic, a company called Elevation, also located in Texas. They did 550 procedures last year, but a similar profile. Good business, excellent clinical care, issues with billing and collecting. We're very confident that moving them onto our platform in the state in which we've had a lot of visibility into the billing and collecting environment, a lot more success in terms of revenue per procedure, and making these businesses accretive acquisitions in the near term. Other factors supporting improving top-line results for Assure in 2021, the first is increasing scale, both through organic growth as well as through M&A. Second is revenue accrual rates. We adjusted down our revenue accrual rates in 2020 to a level at which, similar to which we are signing new in-network agreements. So we think that the downside risks from a revenue accrual rate perspective are limited at current levels. The third is the recovery of write-downs. So we've had some write-downs associated with the third-party billing provider that we terminated in late 2019. The company automatically writes down any receivable that's aged 2 years. But we continue, as we move this function inside the organization, to seek to collect this. And in fact, we collected over $1.7 million in 2016 and 2017 receivables that had been written down. And we intend to do the same for 2018 receivables that had similarly been written down. So we expect to continue having success in that area. And then the fourth factor is signing new in-network agreements. We expect to have information flow on this front. And this is really important because it adds certainty in terms of the timing of being paid and how much will be paid. And again, we expect to increase that from approximately 0% in 2019 to more than 20% of commercial insurance volume in 2020 to close to 50% in 2021. Here we look at the balance sheet and cash flow, and we've had a lot of strengthening of the balance sheet and improving financial flexibility over the last few months. We did a private placement equity raise in December of 2020, raising $10.5 million, and investors included Special Situations Fund and Manchester Management, as well as board and management team. We've had 2 PPP loans, and we also expanded our credit facility, almost doubling that credit facility to $4.5 million. We've also greatly improved cash flow. Again, we've increased that by about 50% in 2020 versus 2019. We expect that to continue to accelerate as we automate that process. And so we're feeling comfortable from a balance sheet perspective and have some dry powder to pursue further M&A. From the management team perspective, I'd like to highlight John Fallinger, our CEO, who has substantial experience with both turnaround stories as well as emerging growth stories, and ending those with corporate exits. Additionally, I'd like to highlight Paul Webster. This is an individual who has been with us for over 2 years now. He previously worked with Air Methods, who itself had been almost an entirely out-of-network healthcare services provider. Over a 5 or so year period, Paul helped bring over $1 billion of revenue that had been out-of-network to in-network and completely changed the complexion of that company and how it was viewed by investors, and he's doing the same for us at Assure. And Sean Blosser, I'd also like to point out, we brought him into the organization to handle our revenue cycle management when we brought that function inside the organization. In 2020, he's done a fantastic job. He has a lot of experience with healthcare billing as well as out-of-network billing, and is doing a great job here at Assure. And then concluding here with the board, a couple people I'd like to highlight. Dr. Chris Romana is a highly respected neurosurgeon, and Stephen Summer is the former president of the Colorado Hospital Association. We announced this morning that John Flood was appointed to Assure's board of directors. John, for those that aren't familiar, was a co-founder and also served as chairman and managing partner of Craig Halem Capital Group. And we're excited for all the things he's going to bring to our board. So, to conclude here, I know we're out of time. Unfortunately, I won't have time to take questions. But if you have follow-up questions or would like to learn more about the story, please contact myself, Scott Kozak, or Assure CEO John Fallinger. We would be happy to discuss further the company and our expectations for 2021 and beyond. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you. This does conclude today's webcast. Thank you for your participation and have a wonderful day.